I really like Ron Paul. In fact, he made the otherwise lifeless Republican debates really interesting. Because Ron Paul, I think, gives it to you straight. He tells you what he really thinks. He's honest and consistent in his beliefs. All the other Republican candidates want to be appealing. They don't want to offend anybody. They all sort of want to invoke the legacy of Ronald Reagan. They all want to sort of make sure that they're the right kind of politically correct conservative that people might actually vote for. And Ron Paul is obviously a controversial figure. If you watch the last Republican debate, Rudy Giuliani attacked him unfairly because Ron Paul suggested, and of course what he said was the truth, that America's foreign policy was one of the causes of 9/11, and Osama bin Laden said as much. And he said maybe we should listen to our enemies, maybe we should do what Osama bin Laden suggests, because Osama bin Laden justified the attacks of 9/11 by saying that, well, we have air bases in Saudi Arabia, home of the holy Islam city of Mecca, and this is offensive, of course, to any Muslim, especially a fundamentalist like bin Laden. I don't think we need air bases in Saudi Arabia, so we could dismantle those. If we would have not had bases there in the first place, then that'd be one less thing Osama bin Laden could say. America's meddled in the Middle East for the last 50 years by overthrowing the elected president of Iran, Mossadegh, whom we didn't like, replacing him with a secular guy named the Shah. After him, we had to deal with a radical Islamic extremist named Khomeini. And now we're not very friendly with Iran. We're not very friendly with a lot of countries in the Middle East, many of which are members of OPEC. And that's a problem. Another thing is our support for Israel. Unconditional support, really. Where it doesn't really matter what Israel might do. We send it money and supplies. We don't ever criticize it. And I think we should. Because a lot of Israel is occupied land. Land that was stolen from the indigenous people, the Palestinians, by radical Jews. And I have no problem with the Jewish homeland. In fact, I think Israel should exist as a state, but it also should have real democracy, where Jews, Arabs, and Christians can all live in peace and can all get along with one another and have representation. But of course there's extremism on both sides. Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt, who made peace with Israel back in the 70s, was assassinated by a Muslim extremist. Yitzhak Rabin, who tried to make peace with Arafat in the 90s, was assassinated by an Israeli extremist who thought that peace with the Palestinians was out of the question. I agree with Ron Paul. I believe that if we don't change our Middle Eastern policies, if we don't quit meddling in Middle Eastern affairs, it will inspire more terrorism. The war in Iraq has radicalized even Muslims that weren't radical before. A lot of them have lost as many relatives as they did when they lived under Saddam. And this whole fiasco, plus supporting Israel as it attacks other countries, doesn't improve our image in the Middle East. It worsens it. It's not as if we can't work with the Arabs. Our only real friends in the Middle East are the Saudis, who are a bunch of rich plutocrats. who hoard all the oil revenue that they bring in. Their country has one of the highest financial disparities in the world. They use the oil money they get to buy yachts and estates, mansions, private jets, sports cars, and all sorts of other nice things, while a majority of their population starves or lives in poverty. It might be helpful for the Republicans to have somebody like Ron Paul. I have to admit I'm sort of skeptical about having another president from Texas. The last two haven't been all that great, Lyndon Johnson and of course George Bush. But I think Ron Paul could do a lot of good in this country, even though he doesn't stand a chance in hell of winning. I think that's sort of a shame. But I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what'll happen with Ron Paul. I like to consider myself a libertarian. He's probably a greater libertarian than I am. And I don't agree with him on everything, but I do agree with him on most things, and I can't say that about most Republicans. A Republican I used to have a lot of respect for, John McCain, has sort of become a sellout, somebody who should know how bad torture is, as he was tortured by the Vietnamese as a POW. But he's sort of been silent about torture, he's sort of been silent about the Iraq War, so I really don't care for McCain anymore. I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I think both parties have a lot of skeletons in their closet. But now I favor the Democrats by default because the current president that we've had for the last 7 years has been a joke, a dangerous, incompetent joke. And I believe that Ron Paul could change a lot of these destructive policies that have endangered America and tarnished her reputation abroad. So if Ron Paul is not completely edged out of the candidacy, you should vote for him. Because if you're a Republican, there's no better candidate than Ron Paul. He makes the most sense and is honest. And hopefully in 2008 we'll get somebody like Ron Paul who will be able to cut through all the bullshit and get right at the heart of what's important for the security of this country and for its reputation internationally.